You're listening to Radio VR with me, Juliet Spare. For some young people, sexual violence, rape, is seen as a simple fact of everyday life. Sexual relations have been desensitised, leaving victims unable to recognise that they are being abused or exploited. A recent report by Britain's Office of the Children's Commissioner suggested that almost 2,500 children were known to be victims of child sexual exploitation by gangs and groups in the UK. London's Metropolitan Police estimated there to be 3,495 gangs in 2013, but that's a figure that some frontline charity workers say is woefully inaccurate. According to Gangs Line, a frontline organisation working with gang members, it's actually more like 10,000, and it says the majority of rapes carried out by them are never reported to the police. 4 years ago, campaigner Carleen Furman carried out a study on 352 girls associated with gangs in the UK. Her report concluded that sexual violence and exploitation are significant weapons used against females associated with or involved in gang violence. 4 years later, a report published this year by the think tank Centre for Social Justice found that female gang members in their teens are being pressured to have sex with boys as young as 10 to initiate boys into gangs. It seems the issue of gang rape as a weapon of choice in the UK is lacking the attention it needs. Going back to September in 2013, a report, Unheard Voices, the sexual exploitation of Asian girls and women, published by the Muslim Women's Network UK, found that a different picture was being presented than the one in the British media, and that the level of abuse of Asian girls in Britain has been missed. I'm joined in the studio by Aisha Nembard, author of How I Escaped a Girl Gang and Rolling in a London Girl Gang. Herself has first-hand experience of living in a gang in London. Imran Chowdhury, a reporter from the newspaper Eastern Eye, and John Brown, head of strategy and development at the children's charity, the NSPCC. And joining us on the telephone is Nazmin Akhtar, vice chair of the Muslim Women's Network UK, who published the Unheard Voices report in September 2013. I said at the end there that it seems that the level of abuse of girls in gangs and from all different backgrounds and predominantly Asian backgrounds is being missed in the media. We'll start with you, Nazmin, seeing as that you were obviously involved in that report. What's happened since?
Well, since publishing the report, we have seen better awareness in terms of understanding that there are Asian and other BME victims involved who are victims of sexual exploitation. However, we do still feel that there's still a lot more that needs to be done, and certainly we think that whilst the media has picked up on it a lot more than it previously had done, and certainly the reason why Unheard Voices even occurred was because we felt that the media was concentrating on only non-BME victims and essentially turning it into a more of a race and religious matter, suggesting that victims of sexual exploitation were all white. And because of that reason, our concern was by doing that and going through that dialogue, they were ignoring all the other victims of sexual exploitation who not giving them a voice and making them even more vulnerable, because essentially it meant they were fair game in the sense that even the perpetrators knew that no one's looking for them, no one cares about them, and that's why we publish Unheard Voices. And since then, I'd say there has been better awareness and a bit more media awareness on the topic, but we still think that there's much more that needs to be done, and certainly much more that needs to be done on a community basis, and even working with agencies such as the police and other social workers, etc.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to turn now to Imran Chowdhury, who wrote this report that I saw in the Eastern Eye. Maybe then you're partly responsible for helping raise the issue within different minorities in Britain. What did your investigation find?
Well, I kind of saw the report that you mentioned, the Centre for Social Justice report, which they did in conjunction with the XLP charity. And I kind of looked at it, and as a paper who kind of focuses and reports on the British Asian community, I thought what angle I could take it on. And I have been told by caseworkers that Asian girls do actually take part in gangs, and they are involved in gangs. And I thought this would be quite an interesting story for us. And I took it forward, and I did some investigations, and I got in contact with an Asian girl in a gang through a caseworker. It's quite shocking because, like has been mentioned, it's a very hidden problem within the South Asian community in particular. the concepts of honour and shame, it's very, very predominant in the South Asian community in particular. It's predominant in most cultures in the UK, but more so in the South Asian community. We see this in examples of the forced marriage statistics, which come out every year. The forced marriage unit, it talks about how, South Asians, the Pakistani, Indian, Bangladeshi communities here in the UK top the list for forced marriage cases. Last year, the government investigated 1,300 cases. They kind of helped and looked into. So it was a good story for us. And what we found that, because of this shame and honour that's predominant in Asian conservative families, girls find it much harder to confide in their families and to seek help from their families. Because how can, they expect to get help from someone that will essentially kill them for being in a relationship, forget being sexually abused, just even being in a relationship and walking down the street with a member of a opposite sex. And this is how serious it is. So this is what we kind of found.
It means that these victims aren't seeking help, and that's where there seems to be a gap.
Yeah.
And in Britain, of young girls growing up from different backgrounds, trying to find some way of fitting into their existence.
Definitely.
But with the constraint of a very conservative religion.
Yeah.
But at the same time, for various reasons, fall victim to either joining a gang or being exploited. Obviously, we're also joined by Aisha Nembard, who was herself in a gang. I guess if you could share your experience with us and then maybe give us some advice that you would say to one of these girls who is in this predicament.
My experience in a girl gang, it was purely, we started it off purely because we was getting attacked by another girl gang. So, any chance that they got to, come and fight us. And it was like a rival, ongoing thing for 5 years throughout my school life. So we decided to, join up as a unit to make ourselves feel safe, because we wasn't feeling safe. No one was protecting us. I think nowadays, involvement with girl gangs, we was the girls perpetrating, going out there and doing stuff ourselves. Nowadays, you find that young girls are not doing the perpetrating themselves. They're affiliated with boy gangs, and that's where you get boys using girls. That's where you get girls getting sexually abused by gang members and stuff like that, because they're not actually in a gang, they're just affiliated with gang members. And that's where you find out a lot of girls are getting used for holding knives, holding a crime weapon, or even holding drugs for gang members. My advice for girls, in school, it all starts. We work with as young as 8, in primary schools. So I reckon it all starts in, school, getting girls aware that, how easy it is to slide into that sort of lifestyle, making sure that a lot of schools that we work with don't like to, highlight their issues, and they don't like to say, yeah, we have got a gang problem in our school. So I think it all starts with, school, because that's where I started. And I think if the schools recognise their problems and not be embarrassed about their situation, they can help these young girls before it gets, very bad.
Maybe I'll turn to you then, John, really, from the NSPCC, because that was a question you asked me at the beginning. Is this a discussion about girl gangs or girl affiliation? And I think Aisha kind of hit the nail on the head there with the change in probably the girl gang structure within the UK and the sort of role that girls now have as an affiliation. And then I guess it's the sexual violence that they are going through within their gangs. Having heard all the different reports, what's the NSPCC doing about it, or what help can be given?
Well, there's a number of things we're trying to do about it, and a number of things we think need to be done. Prevention is absolutely critical, and Aisha was talking there about schools and schools not being embarrassed or afraid or ill-equipped to begin to have these conversations and discussions with children from a really young age, and that's what's absolutely critical. Schools feel overloaded, I think, sometimes, and a lot of teachers tell us we didn't come in to teach children and to talk to children about being sexually abused or about going into gangs. We came in to teach them maths or English or whatever it might be. So they feel ill-equipped, and it goes right back to kind of teacher training, teacher selection, and ensuring that their teachers do feel equipped to begin to have these conversations. That needs to be part of personal, social, health education from a really young age. We would say at the NSPCC from age 5 upwards. And it needs to be part of what we like to refer to as relationships and sex education, because it's the relationships bit that's absolutely critical. Obviously, children need to be taught about the biomechanics of sex and how babies are made, but underlying it all is about relationships and equity and respect. And I think that's absolutely critical. And I think also in relation to prevention, we need to be really targeted and community specific as well. So what is going to stop Asian girls in Bradford getting, from our experience anyway at the NSPCC, from getting drawn into being sexually exploited, sexually abused, and into a gang environment is potentially different to what is going to stop a girl from an African Caribbean background getting drawn into, from a different culture and different community, and that's going to be different from a girl from a white community getting drawn into either a gang environment or a group environment where they're going to be sexually abused and exploited. There are some cross-cutting themes in terms of it being difficult to talk about, in terms of sex and sexual violence being used as a weapon of power and domination, and the excitement as well. And I think we shouldn't be afraid to talk about that. It's exciting. That's why girls get drawn into into this. That's why boys get drawn into it. Fast cars, money, status, all those sort of things. And the young people would tell us there are big positives to it. So we need to be addressing and counteracting those sorts of things as well. But it needs to be community specific, and it needs to start from a really, really young age.
One thing that, I gleaned from the report that was published by the Muslim Women's Network UK was obviously, and to be seen across the board, is that obviously sexual abuse of girls, young women, is a criminal issue, not a cultural one. But I guess, Nazmin, where would you see that the gaps are in getting the help to those who need it most?
Well, I think something that John has just mentioned, needing better awareness, that is, for me, one of the crucial aspects of trying to tackle sexual exploitation of young girls. And by that, it's not just better awareness for the children and for the young girls to understand, better relationships and understand, right and wrong and protect themselves, but also better awareness for everybody involved. So previously John mentioned teachers and that they're not equipped to be able to discuss these issues. But for me, it's actually gone further than that. Teachers aren't necessarily equipped to spot the signs either. For example, we had a case study of a young girl who was truanting from school. Now, the reason for that was actually difficulties at home, which was related to her being potentially forced into a forced marriage, and that's why she was unhappy. She didn't want to come into school either. Other a gang and other members of the gang found out that this girl was unhappy. She was alone. She was truanting from school, and then they befriended her and became friends with her and drew her into the gang. Now, teachers that knew about her truanting and then saw her becoming involved in gangs just had essentially written her off, I guess. That'd be the term to use, that they written her off as just a lost cause, that, she's just a child who doesn't care about education, she doesn't need anything. Not ever considering that maybe there's other reasons for it. Maybe there's a reason why she's not coming to school, and maybe there's a reason why she's been drawn into this gang and she's spending so much time with them. And for me as well, again, better awareness of what other organisations see when they see these gangs. So what Aisha had said about there's a difference now between a girl gang and being affiliated to a girl gang. We've had cases where police officers have actually come across girls in gangs, seen them, and just assume that, they're part of the gang, in the sense that, they're willingly and they know exactly what they're doing, not ever considering that maybe they're exploitation who are trying to get out of it. They're actually trying to find a way to get out of it, but they don't know how to, but for reasons that everyone's mentioned, because they know that if anything comes out, then they might be a victim of honour-based violence from their own family. That the whole issue of shame and honour is there. So definitely what we need is better awareness, but better awareness on a much wider scale. But we need schools involved, we need police and other local agencies involved, and being able to spot the signs to be able to prevent.
I guess I'm going to return to you, Imran. As a reporter for the Eastern Eye, you have your audience is the communities that Nazmin is talking about. Getting the prevention, which John and Aisha talk about, going into schools, actually talking to the girls and being able to sort of advise them. What about the elders in the community? Is there any way that people or a message can get through to those who could then potentially help victims in their own community?
Definitely. Obviously, the onus is on a lot of different individuals, parents in particular. The fact that, sex, the issue and the subject of sex is such a taboo subject in sort of conservative households, not just Asian households, but a lot of conservative households. People don't like to talk about the subject. And this in turn, obviously, it prevents girls and boys from kind of confiding in their parents, seeking help from their parents or advice about, relationships or sexual abuse. So that's a very, I think, pertinent issue that needs to be tackled within the elders, like you mentioned, and the general community, and parents in particular. Parents, they need to be more approachable with regards to sex, with regards to being in relationships. And, the fact is, in some Asian families, very kind of conservative families, the morality and honour is based upon the female. The girl, the boy, he can be, getting away with a lot of things, but if a girl is, like I mentioned, is seen to be mixing or mingling with a member of the opposite sex, or, God forbid, in a relationship, there'll be harsh consequences for this girl. And this is the kind of attitude we need to go away from. It's slowly changing. It's a generational thing. It's slowly changing, but it's still there. It's still kind of prevalent in those communities, and something that really needs to be changed. And in a crude way, what it is like having a girl presentable for marriage, having a untainted, pure girl, so the family can present her for marriage. And if God forbid this girl had any deficiencies, the family's honour is ruined. So that's why we see cases where families, they try and take control. If they hear that their daughter has been sexually abused or in a relationship, they try and take control of that situation, and they will take the girl abroad on the pretext of going on a holiday back home, and they'll force her into marriage. And we have seen cases, the case of Shafilia Ahmed, 17-year-old girl, a couple of years back, who went on a holiday to Pakistan, and she rejected an arranged marriage. And what she did, she drank bleach to try and kill herself. And no one knows how she exactly died, but the parents were convicted of her murder. So we have, sad cases like that. And we even see airport staff now, there is an effort being made for even airport staff to be made aware of signs of forced marriage. That's how far the issue has gone. So I think not just schools and the government, I think there is an onus on the parents, definitely.
Looking back, Aisha, what would you be able to advise these girls who are finding themselves at a level that they kind of want to be affiliated to gangs, or they feel that they need to, or their self-esteem is so low that the only kind of recognition they get from their boyfriend or male friends is if they sleep with them?
Mm-hmm. It's so hard because everyone gets into a gang for a different reason. I talk to loads of girls, and it's so many different. They might not have a dad at home, and then they find a boyfriend that gives them that manly figure and that manly love, and they have never received it before. Or they might be on the urge of getting kicked out of school, getting kicked out of their home, and they're homeless, and they need that guy because he's a little bit older and he's got a house, and he can look after and support her. But you have to understand, these girls need to understand, if a girl's 15 years old and her boyfriend is, say, 21 years old, that guy don't want anything from her but this a using situation, because a girl that at that age, so young, hasn't got anything or can't do anything for a guy at that age. It's too much of a a big gap of an age gap for them to have a connection, a real love connection. So they need to watch out for these guys, and whatever they're offering, the girls at the time, and however vulnerable they feel they are, don't get set up in the trap, because that was just like me. I was getting kicked out of school. I got kicked out of my home at a young age. But my boyfriend, who was a lot older than me at the time, he had a home. He had that set up already. I went in, lived with him, but then I was feeling like I was trapped because everything that I was doing within my life was through him. So if I wanted to go out, he's giving me money, you know, just so he's got into my head and he could have, you know, made me do anything at the time, you know, hold his drugs, hold weapons for him and stuff like that. So these girls need to not put themselves in that sort of situation where they're relying on a guy so much where they're ruining their life in a way. Do you understand?
Yeah, no, definitely.
And another what you just said about the elders, what I find is when I work with these young people and the community that I live in South London, it's a big community, white, black, Indian, Muslims, Pakistani, it's a big community. Every community sticks to their own, and that's not a good thing, especially if you've got a young girl and you feel like your daughter or your son's getting involved in gang life. They're not going to stick to their community. They're not going out with just Muslims. They're not going out with just Indians or just blacks. They're mixing with communities, so their parents need to get to know other cultures just to know what they're about and why their son or daughter is getting attracted to that. If you understand what I'm trying to say.
I mean, this is a rather familiar story that Aisha mentioned about, you know, the advice to a young girl, look at 15, 16, someone who is trying to date you or, you know, go out with you, who's 21, you've got to realise that they're only after the one thing.
Yeah.
It's, you know, I think Aisha was explaining really clearly there about what the situation is, and it's about power, isn't it? And a big power imbalance, and that can create all sorts of problems. But I think in terms of trying to deal with it, some other comments I would make is that you know, this is a long-term piece of work, you know, that needs to be undertaken. We need to recognise that we're talking about kind of generational shifts in a way, really, and already we've heard, you know, within the Asian community, gradual shifts being made, but it does need to be given time. But also the number of issues that are here, it's not just the response. It can never just be the responsibility of individual families or just the responsibility of schools. We do need a kind of joined up approach, and by that I mean, you know, local councils, officials, organisations. Coming together with local communities, community leaders, and trying to ensure that they are as integrated and as linked as possible and are speaking to each other. So there's a real kind of community-wide approach to it, I think, really. That I think, from our perspective at the NSPCC, is the right way forward. Prevention is only one part of the triangle, I think, though. There needs to be help and treatment or therapy or counselling or advice to help, you know, girls and boys as well who are being sexually abused and violated and exploited. Help to get young people to exit from environments and situations, whether that's gangs or whatever they're involved in, and therapy as well. That's the second part of the triangle, and the third one is deterrence as well. And we haven't really talked about that. And that, you know, crimes are being committed. It's illegal to have sexual activity in the UK with someone who's under the age of 16. It's illegal to have sexual activity over the age of 16 with someone who's not giving their consent. If that's happening, offences being committed, and again, I think we need to make sure that law enforcement are appropriately resourced to be able to deal with that robustly and give really clear messages to potential and actual perpetrators that they will be hunted down. So it's about deterrence. It's about help and treatment for victims, and it's about prevention. And those three things, I think, coming together, hopefully will offer us some opportunity and hope for the future, I think.
That triangle, the deterrent bit, Aisha, sorry to ask you again, but do you think, because you're working with these young girls at the moment, do you think they're aware enough, and the young boys or men are aware enough of the levels of prosecutions that they might be?
Not at all. They don't even know what they're doing. The girls don't even accept that they're being abused. The girls don't accept that they're even being raped. You know, they're more accepting that, you know, I done this, so I'm the nasty person because I put myself in that position. That's how much these boys or these gang members get into these girls' heads. They make them feel like it's their fault. I put myself in that position, so I deserve this happening to me. And they don't know what a relationship is. They don't know what a healthy relationship is and what a bad relationship is. And they don't know how a person should treat them, you know, because whatever's going on in their lifestyle, they might have been abused all their life, and then a boy tells them what they want to hear and then treats them exactly the same way, they don't actually understand what a good relationship is. So they think that that's a normal relationship. This is how a guy's meant to treat me. So they don't realise it at all. No.
And that's where it comes back to, early relationships from sex education in school and supporting parents to have those conversations as well. So from a really young age, girls and boys get a clear understanding of what a respectful relationship is and what abuse is and what rape is.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Nasmin, you wanted to interject then?
No, I just wanted to add one more thing.
Sure.
Agreeing with everything that's been said by Aisha, but one of the other reasons why I think that perpetrators are aware of the serious sentences that they, of the consequences of what they're doing. They're aware of it, but they're just that confident that they're going to get away with it. They're very confident that they're not going to get caught because of the victims they've chosen, the vulnerable victims. And like this, I would say this is because of I'm pretty much talking about victims from communities, the Asian young women, Asian young girls. They confident that these girls will never speak up because they know that their parents will never support them. And obviously, Imran spoke about the parents taking their daughters abroad and forcing them into a marriage. Girls are aware of these consequences, and that's why they stay silent. And if anything, I would say to the parents of these children, of parents of the community, that it's your conservative approach to everything that is making your children vulnerable to abuse, vulnerable to exploitation. We're hearing about parents, their reaction to finding out their daughter is being sexually exploited, to take them abroad and force them into a marriage. All that does is silence the daughters of the community even more. And that means that perpetrators know that the victims they've chosen are never going to speak up, and they can get away with it.
Sadly, we've come to the end of our discussion. That was Nasmin Akhtar, Vice Chair of Muslim Women's Network UK. Also taking part in the discussion was John Brown, Head of Strategy and Development at the NSPCC, Aisha Nembard, author of How I Escaped a Girl Gang, and Imran Chowdhury, reporter at the Eastern Eye newspaper. Thanks to all my guests.